Hello. Now, this is the first time I'm doing this like this. Usually, well, when I was down here before, I was always standing up. More recently, I've been doing things up in a lounge, in my very comfortable lounge chair, and I thought, well, what if I film down in the garage, sitting on the chair, do it this way? And I've been pondering it for a while. I'm going to try this. It may not necessarily work. As I said, I'm used to standing up just here and doing this standing up. And I thought, well, I'll just sit down. And because more recently sitting down in a lounge room has been very comfortable. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Midnight Charlie Man Patrick here. This is different for me today, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle this. We'll just see how it goes. I almost feel like standing up at the moment, but I'm going to stay like this. The purpose of this video today it's a historical thing. It's like a journal of sorts. It's like, I was going to say historical evidence. It's for historical purposes, and to like, it's almost like a life review. This extends off the other two videos that I did. I don't know if this is working because I'm not used to, because upstairs I'm used to holding the camera. I'm going to continue with this. I thought, if I sit down here rather than stand up if I was standing up all the time, if I just sit down to do this, I thought it could be just I think what I'm going to do is do a little bit down here, then I'm going to go upstairs and can do it upstairs. Alright, yeah, that's what I'll start off like this, just for something different, just because, just to try it. This is for, I'm just saying, getting my memory down. It's for historical reasons. It's like putting my memory down. Speak of stories of the past, of my memories, and it's in relation to. It extends off the last two. This extends off the last two videos that I did, and when I was talking about Sadistik Exekution and my history with the band, and this is my memories, my history with the band. I was there 50% of the time, maybe 40% of the time. I wasn't there the whole time, but I was there some of the time. And I'm going to start this in my own way. Now, as a side thing, and if Pete, if you ever see this, I don't know what you'll think about it. Chris Hayes, if you ever see this, I don't know what you'll think about it. I don't think Rock will ever see this. Maybe Dave Slade will see it. As a side thing, there's some people in Europe, because there's a big write-up in the European magazine saying Sadistik Exekution, one of the biggest death metal pioneering bands ever. And their albums are very interesting. There's a particular sound to it. It's quite an interesting album. Really interesting elements. Now, over in Europe, and there's even certain parts in America, but mainly over in Europe, that Sadistik Exekution developed a reputation as a great death metal outfit, a great death metal band. And they developed this reputation. And online, as I have spoken about in the other previous two videos, online, in various YouTube videos and write-ups in articles, people have said, oh yeah, Sadistik Exekution, they were premier Sydney death metal band in the early 90s, which continued into the 90s, and legends, and this is from people who never met them, who just read the articles, the interviews, and who never had a chance to travel from Europe down to Sydney, Australia, right, or to Melbourne. I think they even did a couple of gigs in Melbourne, Australia, right? They did do a couple of gigs in Melbourne, Australia, but Sadistik Exekution did do a couple of gigs in Europe, and there was the fan base. Many people from the fan base. This is what I'm trying to say. Many people from the fan base in Europe didn't get a chance to come down to Sydney, Australia. They only know them from the records, right? From the records and from the interviews they read. And so I've actually heard people say, oh, well, mostly in written form, say, oh, I wonder what those guys are like. I wonder what they're like, because they're legends. And I have a totally different perspective on it, because I know them, and when you have that perspective, like when you know them and were on that scene, it's a little bit strange and weird when you hear someone else say, oh yeah, I've listened to the albums, I've seen the live clips, legends, I wonder what they're like. And it's like, well, from my perspective, it's like totally different, because like, I was there, I know these guys. I actually filmed this in my head at about 2 AM this morning. I started filming in my head, putting this video together in my head. I did it all in my head. I went through much of the history, and so for about an hour in my head last night, I was filming this, and then I'm getting a little bit of anxiety at the moment, only because, yes, I did think about this all in my head. I went through much of the history from late high school years through the early days, through 1990, through 1992, even up until the early zeros. And I thought, will I film it? I thought, I'm not going to film it at 2 AM in the morning. Is that light bright enough? I always have issues. This bright, this light, it's bright. Oh yeah, City fucking death metal. It's fucking death. City fucking death. Fuck. Oh yeah, fucking City fucking death metal. Fuck you. Fuck this. Fuck that. Fuck yeah. Fucking chaos. Oh. Okay. Now, I acquired this T-shirt a couple of years ago from eBay, because I never got one in the original days. I got the original days. I never got the original of this back in the day. I can get into that later, as I did in my head early hours this morning when I was filming all this in my head. But I'm not gonna translate it. I'm just gonna high school. In high school, I knew Frank in high school. History background. Pete. So is it harmless to say his last name? Is it? Say his last name? Tell you what, in shock if I decide it's not a good idea, I'll take it out. Peter Zanti, the drummer of Sadistik Exekution. So in high school, Frank, and Frank's brother Pete is the drummer of Sadistik Exekution. There was another drummer. I'll get there later. I sort of hung out with high school in Frank, but he was very busy hanging out with Marcello Rizzuti and Valadi Strathopoulos. Oh, am I getting that last name? Valadi. I don't know if it was right. Marcello. They had a falling out, and I would talk to Frank in the corridors at Canterbury Boys High School. I spoke to Frank in the corridors at Canterbury Boys High School. We didn't have the same classes together, but he used to wear Iron Maiden t-shirts, and he used to wear various metal t-shirts.
The other kids in the form above us, not necessarily the forms below us, but some of the older kids in the high school would literally wear like tight jeans, the tight black jeans, literally wear the tight black jeans and Iron Maiden t-shirts, Power Slave, Number of the Beast. I remember them wearing Dio. I think there was some Ozzy Osbourne t-shirts. There was Poison t-shirts, GNR, Metallica. Some of the kids wore this, and there were a number of metalheads in school. They made up a certain percentage of the grade, maybe about 30%. So on any one day there might be about 10 kids in our grade who were walking around in metal t-shirts, and some of them wore them underneath their blue shirt, and some of them wore them without any uniform. And those kids that wandered around the corridors and wandered around the school not in uniform, they would get away with this for a certain amount of time before the teachers got really pissed off with this and pulled them up on it, and they either got sent home or they got told to come back the next day in uniform. And what they'd do is they come back the next day in uniform and with their blue shirt over the top. That would last for about half a day before they would unbutton their t-shirt. And I just remember seeing Iron Maiden t-shirts, and there might have been a few Black Sabbath t-shirts, a few GNR. I just wanted to make that point because it's just a detail. I remember that Frank always had his blue shirt on over the top of it, if he did wear one. As I said a long time ago now, but the other kids did. I think I came to school with the Bon Jovi t-shirt once, but I had my blue shirt over it. And some of the metalheads pulled me aside in the corridor. They cornered me and they said, "What's this? What's this?" And I said, "Bon Jovi. Oh, look who's..." And they said, "Look, he's trying to live in the fast lane now." I didn't know what a fast lane was. However, I think due to my time on the scene, I lived in the fast lane a little bit more than they did. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't. I'm just saying. I just remember I got pulled over for that. I remember when Injustice came out and when Sound of Heaven came out, and I remember what would happen is on the day that albums would get released, there would be 4 or 5 metalheads who would be late for school. The metalheads, on the first day that an album was released, always rocked up to high school an hour late on the day of an album release, and they carry the album around with them all day. I remember that. I never did that. I never actually did that. It used to take me a little while to save up for my albums, and I'd buy my albums from Bankstown Mall. But that's another thing. But I just remember that.
And I was always fascinated by everyone who had a Guns N' Roses t-shirt or a Poison t-shirt or a Van Halen t-shirt, and there was a couple of Black Sabbath t-shirts around. I was not... The metalheads at Canterbury Boys High School were not generous to me, except for a couple. Frank was, but he was in a different mind frame at the time, and so I didn't really have a great deal of conversation with Frank at the time. The very end days of high school, I did. And so I got bits and pieces of things from the kids in the corridors at Canterbury Boys High School, mainly Menace. They weren't very generous to me. And so Pete had been to Canterbury Boys years before that. Upon leaving high school, that's right, I was about Frank upon the high school. I said, "I bought Who Made Who AC/DC," and he said to his friend, "Oh, Pat bought the Who Made Who," and I was kind of like cool, like felt like I was in. He said, "Pat got the Who Made Who on vinyl. I still have it on vinyl." It took me years to figure out it was a soundtrack. I thought it was an actual studio album, which kind of is. It took me years and years to figure out it was a soundtrack album. Maximum Overdrive. Now, what I was going to say was, out of high school, I started to hang out with Frank. I went to his house. I'd call him up, went over to his house. That was before the library days. Went over to his house, and we'd listen to some Iron Maiden and stuff like that. We'd listen to some music. And on one of the occasions, like maybe the third visit to his house, to Frank's house in Ashbury, on one of the occasions that I went over to Frank's place, Pete was in the lounge room. Pete was in the lounge room in his dressing gown, and his things, and he was like this, and he was like, and I think he must have said something to the effect of, he said, big night, big night. Oh, that was a big night. Had a gig. I didn't really know the term gig at that point. Wasn't even 18 yet. And he had his drum kit in the corner, but it was either, there's two drum kits. The real one, and the one with the pads. What I'm saying is the drum kit, and then the one with the black pads. And I remember a copy of Pretty Boy Floyd, Leather Boys with Electric Toys on vinyl on top of the turntable. And Pete didn't really say much. He had very good demeanour. He didn't really say too much to me. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. We didn't connect because I just met him. But I converse with Frank about music, and Pete would talk Sadistik Exekution, business. It sort of went over the top of my head at the time because I didn't really know what that was. And by about the third or fourth or fifth, by the time about the sixth time, I just went over there to hang out, because that's what you do when you're late teens. You go to a friend's place and you hang out. And Pete would say each time I would go over, Pete would say a little bit more to me, So he'd be like, "Hey, how you going? How you doing? How you going?" And he started to warm up to me. And what I remember is him being mostly keen about Sadistik Exekution. It was called SADX for short, but Sadistik Exekution, and just Shoot the Bees with Frank. And Pete would say, "I got a gig on tonight." He'd say, "Come see SADX." He'd come see. He'd say, "Come see my band, man. Come see the band." And I was fresh, brand new to the gig scene. I remember that Pete would, as I would visit more and more often, Pete would get on the phone in the living room. Dave Slade was the business person of the band. I think Rock did a lot of that as well. Dave Slade, I remember Dave Slade going over to the Ashbury house when I was there. And Dave was all about business. He's like, "Oh, you got to buy a t-shirt. Get the album. So, while I was there on a couple of visits, Dave would come over. Dave Slade would go to the Ashbury house. I think he came over there a couple of times while I was there, to my memory. Now, going to probably jump all over the place here because that's what memory is like. Lewisham Hotel, first early days. Manuel, and Susie and Michelle. Because Michelle was hot. Michelle was very nice, lovely person. Susie and Michelle, lovely people. And the thing about the metal scene, the Sydney metal scene, was everyone was friendly. You know, so you had Guns N' Roses t-shirts at the time, Poison t-shirts, and Motley Crue t-shirts, and because Dave Slade was an aggressive businessman, which worked for the band, that he'd be like, "Buy the t-shirt, gotta buy the t-shirt, gotta buy the t-shirt, gotta buy the t-shirt, buy the t-shirt." How many times people have heard Doomed and Disgusting, him say Doomed and Disgusting over the years, probably not even funny. And I remember being at a Sadistik Exekution gig, and I remember seeing Chris Hayes on stage for the first time, and he had all these safety pins in his arm, and I didn't really know what to make of it. And they were nice to me, but Rock was nice to me. I never had much to do with Rock, but he was nice to me. He was polite to me. Always polite to me. I just didn't have much to do with him. Not in a bad way. I just didn't converse with him that much. I got along well with Chris later on, but Chris was a bit of a mystery to me, in a sense, but Chris was nice to me. And the more that I would visit Frank, the more that I would go out to gigs, Pete would converse with me a little bit more each time. And as the years would pass, I remember, I've got to say this. This is turning out rather differently than I spoke it in my head, because when I'm actually speaking, more things occur to me, more things are coming to me. And Susie and Michelle were great girls, good memories of them, both hot. They were nice, really nice. And Michelle, yes. One day at Campsie, it would have been after Campsie Centre was built, and I think it was summer. It must have been just after midday, and Dave Slade was always in Campsie at that time, always there. And Frank and myself, we were at Campsie Centre, and we bumped into Dave Slade, and he had t-shirts and stickers and all that other stuff, and he gave a t-shirt to Frank, and he said to me, $20 for a t-shirt. And at the I regret this. At the time, I get a bit funny with money, and at the time I could keep an eye. Is this still recording? Tell me it's recording, because I'm probably going to have to do a few of these. Let me see what number I'm on. Let me see check the thing. The thing is, I'm on 22 minutes. I've got to wrap this up soon, because this conks out just at the half-hour mark. Dave Slade said to me, oh yeah, looking back now, he said $20 t-shirt. You know what? If I could just looking back now, at the time, I wish I had just given him $20 and got a t-shirt. And he just handed Frank a t-shirt, and I was like, oh. In my mind, I was like, where's mine? Looking back now, I wish I had just given him $20 and got a t-shirt. It was the white one with the Sadistik Exekution in red. I wish I had just given him $20 so I had a t-shirt. I would have had the original now. It was a bit funny about it at the time. And wish I just had bought the t-shirt, and I would have had it. It just would have been really cool. No big deal, it would have been really cool. Okay, so this wraps up part 1, right? And I'll have to go part 2 soon. Bit of history, my memories of that time, the beginning days on that scene, and I just thought I'd put it on camera. Alright, so I'm going to do this part 2 soon. Okay, good night, Johnny Man Patrick. Okay, let's see how this turned out. Midnight Charlie Man Patrick. We came back downstairs. I thought I'd come back down. I came back downstairs here for a few minutes, and it's raining tonight. By the way, it's the 13th of April 2023, and it's 8:34 p.m. Back in the good old days of Lewisham Hotel, which incidentally is about 10-minute drive that way, and it's still called the Lewisham Hotel. I think someone bought it. Someone did buy it. It's new management. What I'm trying to say is this: it's got a different name now, but I think it's still called Lewisham Hotel. It's one of the first places that I ever went to go for a gig, and they had regular gigs there, and they were mainly death metal gigs, but I think they had all types of gigs there. And back in the days of yesteryear, the memories are a little bit vague. It was a very long time ago. A good time was had by all, and they were good times. They were very good times. In regard to the Sadistik Exekution gigs, I went to a few of them. I didn't go to all of them. I remember one of the gigs that I was at, and they were having technical issues, and I think the gig was having trouble getting started, or they'd do a song, there would be a pause, technical issue, whatnot, and I think someone yelled out, come on guys, we've been waiting 6 months for this to go together. Vaguely remember something like that. And oh, okay, now that's something which is very important to mention, is that when you look it up on YouTube, the live clips of Sadistik Exekution, they're interesting. However, actually witnessing a gig and being there in person was pretty good. it was really good. It was actually being in person is totally different to watching a video on YouTube, and they were actually quite engaging. They were quite captivating, and I never actually did witness Chris Hayes putting all the safety pins in his arm before the gig. I never actually did witness that. I don't think I actually ever went backstage particularly. Rock was a bit of a clown on stage. I don't think he took the whole thing seriously. He just did his own thing, and Rock had an interesting stage presence. Yes, bit of a clown on stage, bit of a clown persona on stage. I don't think they took it entirely seriously. I did mention these things in the other video. I'm going to talk about that. I won't talk about them right now. I'm going to talk about the other things a little bit later that I was going to mention. The people that were there were cool. And I do remember Slasher, a guy called Slasher, who always used to cut himself up. And the girls would always, Susie and Michelle would take care of him a bit, but that came about in later years also, because I remember once in later years I was wearing my Motley Crue t-shirt one day, and I hadn't seen Slasher for a while, and I came across him. These are things that I wasn't thinking about in my head yesterday, but now it's occurring to me as I'm saying it now. And Slasher was on the train, and Slasher saw me and went, "Poser!" And then I got close to him. I was like, "Slasher, it's Pat." He's like, "Oh, hey, man." And he recognised me. Hey. He went, "How you doing?" "Yeah, Motley Crue t-shirt." Slasher was a very interesting guy, and he attended many gigs back then. And I don't actually remember everyone from the scene at the time, but I do remember a handful of people. A long time ago, but there were quite a few bands on the Sydney scene. Look, I was 17 at the time, and I don't remember everything. I don't remember everything about Sadistik Exekution, but I just remember going to these gigs with Frank and meeting people, being introduced to people. And I think that Sadistik Exekution would not have been as big as much of an important element to me if I hadn't gone to the gigs with Frank. Because I went to the gigs with Frank, and he was a direct channel to that. I mean, he was a direct connection to that. I didn't know who they were, so I just got introduced to them directly because I was there hanging out with Frank. Frank said, "Come along to the gig." So if I just had went. The thing is that if I hadn't went by myself, I don't know if I would have found out about it by myself. It would have taken me a lot longer to get there. But if I had went by myself to the Lewisham Hotel, they would, and if I hadn't known Frank, none of them would have known me, and would have been, I wouldn't have known them that way at all, and it would have. It wouldn't have been as significant, probably not as important. Maybe I just, and then later years come over and say, "Oh yes, Sadistik Exekution, yeah, I heard of them once or twice," but because I attended with Frank, that was my direct line. I mean, I got directly introduced to people. Frank didn't necessarily introduce me, but because I went to the gig, because I was with him at the gig, I just met everyone directly. Everyone, and because they were friendly. And because I would attend the Lewisham Hotel at Melbourne Nights regularly, I would go along there regularly. Everyone, it was like a family. I got to know everyone. It became a familiar face. And I wasn't there 100% of the time, but I was there enough that I was definitely there enough to be a familiar face. And much of the time donning my Guns N' Roses t-shirt. And yes. In fact, yeah, just reminiscing on that. I must have seen Sadistik Exekution like 3 times, and the gigs become more sporadic. There's more distance between the gigs. The Sadistik Exekution gigs. It's a bit weird talking about them in a sense, because I only saw them about 3 times live. I know there's other people on the Sydney scene who maybe saw them more than that. They did. And eventually, Lewisham Hotel, yeah. And there's a sadness that goes along with that because they were the good old days. Things were different, things were simpler, there were no mobile phones around, and things were just different back then. They didn't really have technology, there was no technology back then. And a great depth of sadness in regard of those days. And Lewisham Hotel still exists. Rarely go there. Don't really go down there anymore for anything. Haven't been there in years. Last time I went down to Lewisham Hotel was probably about 2010. It's my pen. Feeling loathing. Now, I'm stuck for words. Thinking about where to go in history now. How much time I've got on that? And as the years passed into the mid-90s, I had more conversations with Chris Hayes. Even at one point that I really disconnected from the metal scene, because I went through a phase where I disconnected completely from the metal scene. I was really out of touch with it for a while before I got back in touch with it again. That was somewhere around about 96, maybe till about 98. 2001 I was a bit out of touch with the scene as well, but still hanging out at in Newtown. I remember the Club 77 days and the King's Cross Hotel days, because they had Blink, at the back of a lane in King's Cross, and there was Club 77. Club 77 was very good, and Eli and the boys, and Zoran and Ivor and Divine Electric, but I'm skipping ahead somewhat. Dungeon and just that, yes, did a fair amount of hanging out at the Lewisham Hotel, and what did Pete say? They opened for Morbid Angel. I don't remember what year it was. Morbid Angel came to town. I don't think I went to that gig. Sadistik Exekution opened for them, and he said they put all these plastic bags up as a wall, and they wouldn't interact with us or something. And he says they put all these plastic bags up on the wall, and they wouldn't interact with us, and when those different Sadistik Exekution albums were released, and how, oh yeah, what he said to me, Pete got really drunk, really drunk. Chris Hayes is fond of telling the story. Chris Hayes used to tell the story to me. Meet up with Chris Hayes, and if we gathered around or whatnot. And I used to say, Pete turned up drunk, right? So he's like, Pete got really drunk, really drunk, turned up to the studio, and did the album. And I don't remember which album that was for. Might have been the Cask album. I can't remember. And there was a different drummer at one point, because Pete did not want anything to do with anything more at one point. Yeah, at one point, and they got a different drummer, and just like I think a day or so before, a couple of days before the gig, that drummer broke his arm, So Pete came back into the fold. I'm going to wrap this up in a sec, because I'm going to talk about this more upstairs, because I'm actually so really comfortable speaking in the lounge room now, in the comfortable lounge room. I'm going to set the timer. I can actually get my thoughts come more coherently upstairs. I think. I like being down in the garage. I like being down in the garage. Oh, I like being down in the garage. Oh, I like being down in the garage. Now, yes, I'm gonna wrap it up. I'll think of more stuff. I'll think of more things. Because individually, they're all great musicians. All great music. Together was a interesting disaster. Together was a bit of a disaster. Together, not a great formation. Together, but individually, really good. But I'm going to talk about it further when I get back upstairs. In case okay. Hello, and thus this continues. Back in the lounge room. Actually, I feel really comfy here now these days. I don't mind being in the garage, but I've gotten used to being here. Now, okay, so as the years would progress, like sometimes during the 90s, and even in the zeros, but in the 90s I would turn up at Frank's place. Frank, and sometimes Frank wouldn't be there. Pete would open the door and say, "Come in, man, come in. Frank's not here, just come in anyway." And Pete would either be in the lounge room or in the kitchen. They'd be sitting by the phone. And those were back in the days where he had an exercise book and had all the numbers handwritten down. We all did. And in fact, when you went out to a gig in those days, or you went out to a nightclub, you usually carried a pen and paper with you. There was none of this. Oh, are you on Facebook? What's your Facebook? What's your Facebook? There was none of that. And Pete would be in the kitchen, and I was just trying to think that if I ever remembered if Chris Hayes went over to visit Pete at Ashbury. He probably did. I don't recall it. I wasn't there. I don't really recall. I know that Dave Slave went over there a couple of times when I was there, and maybe Rock went over once or twice. I don't recall. Now, so I would go over there, and Pete would be there, and as the years progressed, I would sit with Pete in the kitchen, and just to clarify things, the subject was never sadistic execution, because they didn't like talking about it. They never. Actually, one way to make those guys cringe, one particular way to make those guys cringe, is to mention the band, to mention Sadistik Exekution. That will make them cringe. They'll be like, yeah, it'll make them cringe. They don't want to talk about it. And right now I'll be like, Pat, what are you talking about it for? Okay, so I would talk to Pete about history. Pete knows his history, and so in those days I wasn't that great with my history. Pete would talk about history and religion and things like that, and sometimes he'd say, "You want to hear my songs? You want to hear my songs?" And so we'd go into the back room where Pete had a certain amount of Sadistik Exekution memorabilia and other musical artifacts, and Pete had all his own music, which now he recorded some of it. He used to record some of it with Wilco. I think it was Wilco, Dave Wilco. I don't know if Dave Wilco was a part of Meridian. Dave Wilco ran the studio that Pete went to. But what was I going to say was that Pete would play me all the songs that he recorded, and they were fantastic, really, really good. Well, some of it was acoustic stuff, some of it was electric guitar stuff, a lot of it was acoustic stuff. He'd play the drums, he'd play the guitar, and even he did the vocals for some of it. I think Dave Walker did the vocals on some of the other songs. And there was some amazing stuff there, absolutely amazing stuff there. Now, some of it was hard rock orientated, some of it was glam rock orientated, some of it was goth rock metal orientated, some ballads there, some comedy songs, and what keeps coming into my head now? Because alright, so the year 2006, because I'm just remembering that, something about society. It's like, bog. It's been so long. Society, something about society. Okay. Something about society. Look what you're doing to Frank the Crank. You know, society. Look what you're doing to me. Society. Is that it? I'm trying to remember the name of the band because it was an outfit that Pete had in 2006, 2007, because I remember he said to Tia and her friends one night that they were going to be his backup singers at the Sando, because he had a gig at the Sando. And society, look what you're doing to me. And there was a bunch of songs. He had a collection of songs. The thing is, Pete was a very versatile musician. And I just remember back in those days, in the 90s and also in the zeros, that sometimes in the back room of the house at Ashbury, Pete would play me. He said, "Come and hear my songs, tell me what you think." And he'd play me all these songs. And none of this had anything to do with Sadistik Exekution. None of it had anything to do with it. And he rarely talked about it, very rarely talked about it. And when he did, he talked about the shoddy business side of things, so how they all screwed over and everything like that. It was almost a taboo subject to talk about that band. And also, I think Meridian, had something to do with Holland. Something had something to do with Holland. I don't remember now. And Chris Hayes. Let me, because I'm going to run out of memory. I don't want to run out of memory. I think it was garbage bags. Pete said that Morbid Angel put up. They said put a wall of garbage bags up because they wanted their own, and they were shut off from the band or something. I don't know. Was that in Melbourne? I don't know. Chris Hayes, Reverend Chris Hayes. I just call him Chris. A lot of people call him Reverend Chris Hayes. Chris Hayes. He is a versatile guitarist, and he has a lot of very great solo work. In fact, let me just look him up on here on Google. And I've been to a few of his shows. Look, I went through some weird periods throughout the years where I didn't really attend anything. I went through some pretty weird phases, which involved alcohol, beer, and in fact, actually, I haven't had a drink for 5 weeks. I haven't had a drink for 5 weeks now. And when I do drink, I drink a couple of long necks. That's about it. That's my limit these days, is a couple of long necks. I digress. Chris Hayes, Reverend Chris Hayes. Let's look him up. Chris, see what we get. Okay. Chris Hayes, musical artist. What do we get? What do we get? Come on, browser. Browser. Hello. Browser stuck. Here we go. What we got? Yeah, what was that? Ever heard of them before? Sadistik Exekution? Here's your groups. Right. Now, yeah. And, what images are there here? This is going to be interesting. What images are there? Is there anything? Memories? Oh, yeah, see, look. Yeah. Yeah. Really good. Now, with the, what was I going to say? What was I going to say? What was I going to say? Come on, get it together. Come on. Right. Chris Hayes has some very, very, very good, and that guitar that he built. Now, I went to see Chris Hayes in October last year in Surrey Hills. He had a show on with a gallery. He's got fantastic artwork, and he put on a great solo guitar performance. It was really terrific. Really terrific. And he usually puts them on about once a year or so. And he's put many of them on in the past. I remember years and years ago, in the zeros, somewhere around the 06 or 07, he did one at Club 77. Oh, and Ronnie Simmons did one too. Before Ronnie Simmons went over to Los Angeles, I think in about 2005 or 2006. Ronnie Simmons, it's Club 77 one night, and he said he got everyone to gather around. He got everyone's attention. He wanted everyone to be quiet. And he had an acoustic guitar in his hand. He wanted everyone to be really quiet. And so finally, he got he got our attention. Everyone was really quiet, and he got the guitar and he smashed it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so he's now with the Rose Tattoo outfit. And also Dave Slave, very, very good bass player. Okay, it's sort of weird saying these things about. Okay, it's weird, but it's not weird because I know these guys, but they're terrific musicians, and no, truly, Chris Hayes puts on fantastic shows, and I'm not sure what Pete's doing at the moment. I don't know if Pete has a musical outfit at the moment. I don't know, and I know that Rock is a really, really good artist. Rock likes to go fishing. He likes to go fishing. Used to. I don't even think I had a conversation with Rock back in the day. It was nice to me, but I just never had a conversation with him. Mostly Pete, a little bit with Dave Slave, and later on with Chris Hayes, because I would always bump into Chris out on town. And I bumped into him once in the World Bar at the King's Cross in about 2005, and I saw him at the nightclub. And he said, "Pat," he put his arm around me. He said, "Your family." I was like, "Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's nice." Yeah, and I always bump into him at the townie. I went through some weird years though, some very weird years. They say weird things, I think I hit the age of about 35, and suddenly I was having better conversations with people. suddenly people that weren't really talking to me before, suddenly all of a sudden they were talking to me, and which was good and interesting. And so separately as musicians, they're all fantastic. Coming together for Sadistik Exekution, it was studio albums are very, very good, but live was a bit of a mishap, a little bit disjointed live, still fascinating to watch, curious to watch. Yeah, and Ticket and Jagged, and the scene was a interesting place to be. In regard of Slasher, because Slasher, big Slayer fan, and I did end up, because he got hit by a train once and survived it. Got hit by a train and survived it, and I ended up in the Zeros, bumping into him and having a couple of conversations with him in Newtown. I would bump into him on the street, and I've had a couple of conversations with him. But I didn't have those conversations with him in former years, but I did later on. Yeah. And Dave Slave is very good with his jiu-jitsu. I don't know if he calls it jiu-jitsu. I don't think it is. But it's tight. It's something. He's very good at it. I don't know if I'm even going to upload this. I just thought I'd talk about it. I didn't think I was going to talk about it tonight because I thought, I don't know if I have the energy for it. I thought, I'll just press record and do it anyway. So, there was Pete had Meridian. Oh, and then April Junkies. April Junkies came along in 2005. Yes, to mention April Junkies 2005 with Dean, and Mikey and Kylan. And okay, I'd just like to emphasise that it's the 20th of April 2023. It's 12:31 p.m. and Courtney, I did not forget about. Okay, Courtney, I haven't forgotten about you. So, in regard of April Junkies, it was Kylan, it was Courtney, and Courtney, you have to remember, in regard of bands, a band has a following, usually like an extended family. So when a band does a gig, they have a certain amount of supporters at that gig. What I'm trying to say is this, that okay, when a band plays, they have friends, regular friends that usually attend most gigs, and so it's not just a band, it's friends of the band, and as friends of the band, and that goes along with most bands. Yeah, I wanted to emphasise the fact that with a band, it's not just the band. There's behind the scenes when I say the band has friends who support them and turns up to most gigs. They have, you would consider a following, extended family, as I said. Okay. Alright. Wanted to say that. It's almost like a behind the scenes thing, in a sense, because I think when people speak about bands, people only think about the band, but there's many people there's always usually a bunch of people who extend off that. Okay, as an extended point, people who only attend international gigs would not be very aware of this, and I prefer local gigs.
I prefer the more intimate atmosphere of a local gig. And you go along to a local gig, and there'll be the band there, but you have quite a few people. You might have 5 or 10 people hanging out with the band, and that's their friends, who do go to most gigs in support of, and sometimes, more often than not, there's a few of those friends who might as well be in the band. They might as well be. Anybody who attends international gigs would, I don't know if they'd be very clued into this. And as I said, I much prefer local gigs, the more intimate atmosphere. It's so much better. I always feel a little bit disconnected at international gigs, and big arenas I always feel a little bit disconnected. Local pub gigs are ideal, and they're the best. And yes. Oh. Just as a thing, this is a fact, at all the international gigs I've been to, and the people that I have observed, looked at, when I'm going to my seat in the stadium, I look at them briefly, and I'm like, I've never seen you at a local gig. Never. See all these foreign faces like this, and it's like, you don't go to local gigs, do you? Never seen you at one. So it's all these metalheads who I've never seen before. It's like, do you go to local gigs or only international gigs? It's a bit weird, because it's like, I look at them and I'm like, you don't really go to local gigs, do you? Not, I can just tell. Yeah, yes. Now, not forgetting to mention, of course, that Chris Hayes attended many April Junkies gigs, or quite a few of them, because he knew Mikey, and also Eli Reskov, who had centerfold Tommy Gun, Divine Electric. So Eli would attend many of the, in fact, actually, Pete said, we want Eli to be our singer. I remember this. And so what happened, Diana and Mikey hung out with Eli, but Eli never joined April Junkies, and they got Kywin, because Kywin was just rehearsing with them. Kywin rehearsed with April Junkies and ended up being their singer. April Junkies do have an extended history, but just focusing all on the old times at the moment. Because, yeah. So Eli would be at many of the gigs, and Chris Hayes would turn up, and I think outside of people who aren't familiar with perhaps the gig scene, is that almost a family, because all regulars, and of course people would always turn up to the gigs that weren't connected, weren't a part of it. They were just, people would just, you get people at the gigs who'd never been to the gig before but just turned up because they wanted to go out. But for the most part, it was family. Everyone knew each other. Yes. I'd like to emphasize that these are my memories. And so it's, what I was going to say was, okay, the Sydney metal scene, a pretty big scene. And for honourable mentions to Paul Corby and Ronnie Simmons, and there was a few areas, different groups of friends. a bunch of bands, 5 or 6 bands on the Sydney metal scene, and who were interconnected. You used to have the Hell City Glamours, and you used to have, I think it was a band called Lust. I think Ronnie Simmons was in Lust. Oh, am I getting that right? And come on, Pat, you can do it. I can do it. Also, Dave Balfour, who organised many gigs, and Doomfox. Doomfox are a very good band. Good band. Mad Charlie. And before I said 5 or 6 bands, there's probably 20 bands on the scene. Yes.
That was a fun adventure. I went to almost all those gigs I attended. Eli had Tommy Gunn, and then I think Eli had Centerfold, Tommy Gunn, and then Divine Electric. And Divine Electric is no more. And there was Mad Charlie. There was Fox, still is Fox Company. I don't know. And the good old days when you'd leave the town at 2, 3 a.m. and walk up to the Sly Fox. And Chris would usually be there. Sometimes Chris Hayes would usually be there. I must emphasise, though, that the people from Europe and overseas who have this thing about Sadistik Exekution being, the albums are great, but it was barely mentioned on the scene that much. Like, not really that much. But individually, the individual projects are terrific. Pete has amazing stuff. Terrific acoustic stuff. Take me in the back of the house. You take Pat, listen to this, tell me what you think. And Chris Hayes is amazing on that acoustic guitar as well. He's got really good shows, really good shows, and really good artwork. So yes, I've just expressed this in a way which is just my memories of it, my perspective, my memories. So there's some details that I haven't included because, well, they're not my details and I don't remember them. But I went to a great many gigs. Over the years, many gigs over the years, and Sadistik Exekution was a part of that during the 90s. They were a part of that during the 1990s. And back in the old times, and I didn't see the scene. I wasn't part of the scene during the 1980s because I was at home watching movies. And but when I became of age and was able to go out legally, and then start going to the Lewisham Motel and the Beck scene. I'm going to wrap this up in a sec. I'm going to wrap this up. And so, and I remember that Sadistik Exekution, they went to Europe. I remember they went to Europe. And I don't know much about that trip. I've read some of the interviews of that. The interviews are surreal. It's like, oh, they can be surreal in a sense. They had a big adventure in Europe, and I think they met a lot of people, played gigs in Europe, and they did do a certain amount of touring, and were successful. And also the Chris Hayes and Rock both have a great amount of artwork to their name. The only reason I'm talking about any of this is because I watched that documentary about San Francisco, and I got a bit triggered, and I was comparing scenes in my head, and then I happened to think about Sadistik Exekution, and that's why I'm talking about it now, because I started thinking about that as well. I started thinking about the scene in Sydney in the early 90s. Even though the scene that was talked about in San Francisco in the Oakland area is from the early 80s, I started to think about the scene in Sydney from the early 90s. And that's the only, and so I thought, well, I suppose if I talk about this now tonight, but that's done. Considering that I actually filmed all this in my head at 2 AM yesterday, so yes. I don't know if I'll upload it. I don't know if I'll upload this. I don't know, but that's about my memories. Most of my top conversations took place with Pete, because he became a part of the group that I was with in 2006 with the X, and he became a part of that, hung out with us for a while, and the irony of that is that half the group was from the metal scene and half it wasn't. There's about 15 of us, and the irony is that half of them didn't know about Sadistik Exekution. They weren't aware of it. Pete never talked about it. But he did have his new band. He did have was doing his solo project at the time.
And of course, that was the time of 8-Ball Junkies in 2005, 2006, and up to about 2008. Not forgetting, of course, that, because we'd all go to the 8-Ball Junkies gigs. We'd all attend those gigs. I just thought I would put that in there.
And so he came to hang out in that, but a couple of people within that group did know about Sadistik Exekution. They did know about that. Anyway, yes, and that came to be for a while. Yeah. Bit of trauma involved there. Bit of trauma, bit of sadness. Good times. Memories, good times. An older time. An older time on the Sydney metal rock scene. I'm going to wrap this up. Midnight Island Man, Patrick. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If I do upload this, appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, thank you.